Hello everyone, and welcome to my second video interview for Mining Indaba Digital in May. Today I'm talking to a company that has more recently entered Africa's mining industry and is looking to make waves in the critical mineral space. Interestingly, using artificial intelligence to find new deposits worth developing. Who am I talking about? A company known as KoBold Metals, which is set to develop an historical copper deposit in Zambia. But what does this mean for Zambia? And for Africa, and even the world? Filling me in on my burning questions is Josh Goldman, president of KoBold Metals. Josh has an interesting CV, and understanding his background makes for a great read. But for now, join me in welcoming Josh as we explore his and KoBold Metals' views on critical minerals, global demand versus in-country beneficiation. So Josh, let's jump right into our conversation. KoBold Metals is a relatively new player in the mining industry. Can you give some context to your project and your company's strategic direction?
Thank you very much, Laura. We started KoBold because the yawning gap for critical materials for a low carbon economy is enormous. By our estimates, we need more than $15 trillion worth of copper, nickel, cobalt, and lithium to fully electrify the global vehicle fleet by 2050. And that supply gap today is going to be filled with new discoveries. The question is, where are those new mineral resources going to come from? And we started KoBold because we believe that the industry is going to have to innovate in exploration methods in order to discover those new deposits and in order to put those deposits into production to supply the global economy with the raw materials it needs for a low carbon economy. So our Mingomba project in Zambia is one material contribution to this project. Globally, we're going to need much, much more than this, but we are working to explore and define and put into development a world-class copper deposit in Zambia that will make a significant contribution to this global problem.
Super, Josh, and it's great to see global businesses like yourselves investing in Africa and investing in this critical mineral space. But forgive me on my next question, but I just have to ask, KoBold Metals is linked to some big technology titan names such as Richard Branson and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. Josh, how did they fit into the KoBold story? And would you agree that this indicates disruption in the mining space to have these kinds of men associated with the company?
Yes, I think what it indicates is the opportunity for innovation in exploration. I think to find many, many high quality new deposits that we can sustainably develop and that we can put into production to serve this global need, we have to get much better at finding new ore deposits. And that means we're going to have to use methods above and beyond the methods that we use to find the last generation of ore deposits. That means getting much more insight out of data. That means picking up small signals in noisy data sets because we're looking for deposits that are further undercover. It means picking up signals in sparse data sets that give us clues about systems where the mineralizing processes are present and we should invest in exploration. It means inventing new types of sensors and combining them with all of the other geochemical and geophysical methods that we have today. And so our investors, the individuals you mentioned came together to create a group called Breakthrough Energy Ventures to invest in innovative, high-growth companies that can make big impacts on climate change. We've had several other venture capitalists from Silicon Valley become really important investors to the company. It's because there's this opportunity for innovation. There is this incredibly strong market demand for the resources, and there's this yawning gap again in how we are actually going to find these resources. And that's what we're here to do at KoBold, is both to invent the technology that we can put into practice to make better exploration decisions, and then actually go invest capital behind those ideas and go invest in projects that we originate and own 100% of, projects where we are joint venture partners and we are putting our technology to work alongside our capital for the benefit of ourselves and our joint venture partners. And we are an exploration company. We do the same things that other exploration companies do. We invest in data collection by drilling holes and collecting data for airborne surveys and taking rock samples and mapping. But how we do so is guided by our technology to make better and better and incrementally better over time decisions. And that's the opportunity for innovation in this space.
Josh, I think not only is KoBold being disruptive in the materials that it's choosing to look for, but in the way it's choosing to look for them with your technology, as you say, very, very exciting. And I do think a bit of groundbreaking elements there for the mining industry. But if we can move on, Josh, to the crux of our interview today, naturally there's an inclination for the company to invest in projects that are going to feed electric vehicles, renewable markets, and maybe even greater worldwide technology objectives, right? But how do global businesses like KoBold position themselves to be globally competitive in this space, while also acknowledging local governments' objectives to build greater upstream wealth from their minerals?
Yeah, it's a really important question. And I think we operate in places where the economics will be attractive to support investment, and where the fiscal regime is a fair one that lends itself to stability. It is right and reasonable for countries who possess the mineral wealth to want to preserve a material and very large share of that wealth for themselves. And that is in practice with between royalties and taxes. That is in practice what happens in most jurisdictions around the world, and that's very important. It has to be fair in order to be stable. So we operate in places where we believe that there's a stable regime, where there are attraction. It is attractive to invest for the long term, and that's true of all the jurisdictions around the world where we operate. And the balance that governments are striking is obviously between wanting to ensure that there's a material and fair share for the country that originates the mineral resources, while also attracting investment, because ultimately we get these new deposits discovered and put into production because they attract capital, and capital that can be used elsewhere in the world and in other industries entirely. I mean, one of the reasons that there's such a giant supply gap is just because there's been insufficient investment in exploration at all. And so what we have to do, and one of KoBold's objectives, and one of the things we are doing, is just attracting more capital into this space entirely, capital that would be going elsewhere, capital that's not otherwise going into mineral exploration. And it's really important, and it can be a very attractive use of capital if we're good at making discoveries, and then we can make the long-term investments to put those into production.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Josh. Look, as I've mentioned, and as you've mentioned, you are a very global business. But and you also touched on, stable regimes, and obviously Zambia is one where you feel that is the case. But if I could ask you about your general view about Africa, I mean, a lot of companies are afraid to invest on the continent, where there's perceptions around poor legal frameworks and corruption in many other parts of Africa. But KoBold is not afraid to be in Africa, right?
We're very excited to be in Africa. We think there are lots of great opportunities to operate well and to make investments throughout Africa. And we only do business in parts of the world where we can operate to our high ethical standards. And it is an absolute requirement for us that we be a responsible operator in all respects. That's with regard to safety. That's with regard to the way that we work with communities. And that means avoiding corruption entirely. And it's incredibly important from the top to the bottom of our business. So we only operate in jurisdictions where we're confident that we can build a good and long-term sustainable business and uphold all of our ethical commitments. And there are lots of opportunities to do that in Africa, and you see where we're operating, and we see many more opportunities besides where we're operating today.
Oh, gosh, fantastic. Look, because we're speaking about critical minerals and we're speaking about the role that Africa is going to play, there's the missing element in the story really is logistics. This is an area that's lacking for Africa, right? How does the continent overcome this to make sure that it is a competitive player in the critical mineral space?
It's a great question, and I would expand it even beyond logistics. Infrastructure includes roads and power and rail. Power is a big topic in Southern Africa, of course, and this is not a problem that I think we can solve independently of exploration and development of mineral resources and of responsible exploration and development for mineral resources. Part of what will spur the development of new infrastructure is finding great deposits that we want to put into production. building the power and upgrading the power system and upgrading the roads and the rails, there won't be the resources to do that without the industrial opportunities, and then the industrial opportunities won't be possible without the upgraded infrastructure. And so the more great deposits we find, the more we find them in places that will support great development. For example, our Mingomba project is in the Zambian copper belt. It is in the core of a district that has been a hub of mining activity for many decades. And this is a perfect place where we have all the elements that we need already. And some upgrades to roads and some great upgrades to power will absolutely be necessary in order to put the Mingomba project into production. And those are the things that are made possible by having a great discovery and a great deposit that can become a really world-class new mine. And more of those will result in more and more infrastructure, and it will support the investments that we need to make in new roads and new power facilities and so on. And so I see these as linked. And if we're really effective in exploring, and we have the sort of growth engine for the mining sector, that will support the infrastructure upgrades that we need. And obviously that will have really significant compounded benefits for the rest of the economy. But the roads aren't for the exclusive use of mining companies. A more stable and higher capacity power system will benefit all of the people and the other kinds of businesses that are in and around them. And we've seen this in, the growth and the heyday of the Zambian copper belt. Like the rising tide really does lift all boats, and you see sort of improvements to schools, and you see other businesses thriving around mines as well, and that's the kind of thing that we hope to create. And it's very much possible. That sort of natural mineral endowment is there, and we have to work on the really hard science problem of figuring out where are these harder to find deposits, and then we have to do all the legwork to put these deposits into production responsibly.
Josh, thank you for your responsibility from a community perspective, from your workforce perspective, from the environment, and thank you for the investment commitment you're making to infrastructure and logistics in Africa. I think a lot of mining companies could learn from some of the things that you're saying about the importance of these things and building economies around great discoveries. I think, Josh, in closing, if we can just wrap up our discussion, ultimately, do you think there really is a balance to be found between developing critical mineral projects for global supply and also benefiting for local upstream opportunities as well?
Absolutely, there is. And we see this in many parts of the world that we're working in. We certainly see this in all the African jurisdictions we're working in. We see it very strongly in Zambia with our various projects in Zambia, and especially the Mingomba project. There's a global need, as we've talked about, both for the raw materials and for the methods to find new sources. But there's also a very strong need in the various communities where we're operating for new opportunities. And I think that the kind of dialogue that we're having with governments in Zambia and elsewhere indicates that there are many situations that can be very beneficial for all parties, and we're operating in places where the conditions for investment are good, the support of the government is strong and fair and adherent to the laws, and the communities where we're operating are receptive and encouraging, and we are in a really good dialogue with them about opportunities to benefit all of us.
Such a wonderful message, Josh. Thank you so much for your time and chatting to me, and I can't wait to see KoBold Metals' presence at Mining Indaba 2024 as well.
We look forward to being there. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Josh.
Cheers.